Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to the Education Students Council Conference Week 2021. So my name is Stefania and I'll be the moderator for this session. So in February each year, all year one candidates have 1 week of class replaced with 1 week of professional development. This conference week is organized by the Education Students Council in partnership with the Faculty of Education at Western University. So we have 27 sessions this year. This is session number 5. This is our first day. And this session is titled Accessibility and Disability in the Classroom. We would like to start off by thanking our speaker, Anne-Marie Dolinar, for taking the time from her busy schedule to share their knowledge and expertise with us. You've already read their bio on the Conference Week website, so you already know who they are. This session will include a 40-minute presentation followed by a 20-minute Q&A discussion. So please turn your audio and video off for this session on Zoom. And during the Q&A, please type your questions into the chat box and I will read them out to the moderator. I will read them out. And in case we don't have any questions, we'll just hand the session back to Anne-Marie. So if she wants to share any additional information regarding the topic being discussed. And so just at the end, please make sure to fill out your check for understanding form that you attend for this session so that you can get we can check out that you've participated. And you can find this form on the Teacher Candidate Conference Week website under the session description. And if you have any questions, you can contact the organizing team. And I hope you enjoy the session today. So I will hand it over to Anne-Marie now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Stefania. So happy to be speaking to you today on the topic of accessibility and disability in the classroom. Like Stefania said, my name is Anne-Marie Dolinar, and I'm here today from the Rick Hansen Foundation School Program. Just before I begin, I would just like to acknowledge that I'm presenting to you today from my home office, which is on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee people, as well as acknowledging that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So this is just kind of a really quick agenda of what I'm going to go over with you today. So I thought I would start us off with some disability awareness trivia. I'd love your participation, but it's certainly not a test. And then I'll go into our school program offerings and how they can support you in confidently covering these topics of disability, accessibility, inclusion in the classroom, whether you're doing practicums or with your future class. And then I'll have some notes at the end on how you can get involved with us if you're interested. And then, like Stefania said, we'll have lots of time for questions and answers if you have any points of discussion or questions for me. So I'll start us off with our activity here. So I'd love everyone to make use of the chat for this if you can. It's just a quick series of, I think, 5 altogether, true or false questions. So I'll sort of just put the, true or false question up. And if you can put your answer into the chat, that's sort of how I'll keep track of how people are answering. So our first one, true or false, it is always easy to see if someone has a disability. What do we think? Okay. A resounding false is what I'm getting in the chat. And that's fantastic. You guys know what you're talking about. So of course, we know that many disabilities are invisible. The examples given here are learning disabilities or being deaf. And also someone can have a mobility disability, even if they don't use, a wheelchair, for example, or have a vision disability, without those sort of things we associate with that, whether it's a cane or a guide dog. Great. All right, so the next one, true or false, many people who are legally blind can see light and forms. All right, I'm seeing mostly true. And again, you're absolutely correct. So like we just said, disabilities range a lot in how they're experienced, and many people who are blind can still see light, forms, and colors. Great. True or false, if you see someone with a disability, you should help them as much as possible. False. Okay, and I like this note here, ask if they want help. That's a great note to include. perfectly correct again. So, you know, people who live with disabilities can live independent lives and certainly don't always need help. And like Justine, I think it was, commented, exactly, if you ever do want to help someone with a disability, just treat them like you would anyone else and simply ask first. And I would also add that, you know, if you do offer to help or ask if someone needs help and you do get a no, certainly never take that personally. Sometimes people with disabilities just have kind of their way of their system of doing things. Number 4, true or false, American Sign Language, or ASL, which is the primary sign language that we use here in Canada, is just like English. You simply use your hands instead of your voice. True or false? This one I have to admit, I don't think I would have known the answer prior to working here at the foundation, but I think I'm getting all false. It is its own unique language. Great. Yeah, so ASL is a separate language than English, and the main difference here is that ASL actually came to the US and Canada by way of France and their deaf and hard of hearing community, so it's actually much more closely related to French in structure than English. And then our 5th and final question, true or false, it's okay to pet a guide dog or service dog because they're incredibly well-behaved, trained dogs that know how to interact with lots of people. And again, I'm getting the resounding correct answer. Right, so yeah, we should never pet a guide dog or service dog because we can obviously distract them from performing their important jobs for their owners. And then also just a note to say that guide dogs assist people with a range of disabilities, not only people who are visually impaired, but that guide dogs are a type of service. Great, thank you so much for your participation there. And I mean, you guys seem to be, you know, already pros on these topics, so that's excellent to see. I wanted to just make a note here, just kind of intro to myself. If you did have a chance to read my bio, maybe you know some of this already, but I actually started my career as a dietitian, and I did my undergrad at Western. So I heard from Stefania earlier on that you guys have actually been doing your whole year so far virtual. So maybe some of you haven't been on campus yet. But here's a photo of me, I want to say in probably when did I graduate? Maybe 2014 or 2015 at, you know, on campus there. And then only a few short years later, I was back on campus for my brother's graduation. And in between that time, I myself sustained a spinal cord injury. I became paralyzed from the waist down. And I just thought, one, of course, because I'm presenting to you at Western, I thought it was, you know, important to include that I myself was a Western student, but also just to note, you know, that when I was there doing my undergrad, I have to admit that I was not, like, the accessibility of the campus was not very top of mind for me. You know, I walk to all my classes. We know it's a big campus, lots of steep hills, lots of old buildings. And it really wasn't until I was back as a wheelchair user, those you know, few years later, that it really became clear to me, like, wow, there are improvements to be made. You know, sometimes when we don't have the lived experience ourselves, we kind of don't see the problems, right? But I mean, to go to my brother's grad, like we had to reserve specific seats at the convocation hall that I could actually, so that I could actually access the seat. I had to when there was kind of like a reception afterwards, and I had to, you know, use a whole different entrance than the rest of the general population and like navigate these halls. Luckily, I kind of knew the building, but it was, you know, you're kind of like going around, meandering through these halls, trying to find the elevator. Oh, that one's not in service, et cetera, et cetera. So just something to keep in mind, you know, going forward, maybe when you are back on campus, you can kind of take a look at, notice some of these things, and certainly even in your day-to-day lives today. For those of you who might not know Rick Hansen, he is the founder of the Rick Hansen Foundation. And he is also someone who sustained a spinal cord injury. He became paralyzed when he was in his teens. And he was someone who, you know, was really active, really loved the outdoors prior to his injury. And those are, remained his passions after his injury. And he went on to complete what became known as the Man in Motion World Tour from 1985, to 1987. It took him 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days to complete, but he wheeled his wheelchair around the circumference, like the distance of the circumference of the earth. And he did all of this to, one, raise awareness of the potential of people with disabilities, and also raise funds for spinal cord injury research. And it was upon return home to Vancouver that the foundation was born, so he could continue this important work. And the school program is one part of the foundation. And our program is sort of built on these 3 main pillars, which are awareness, empowerment, and change. And so, we really aim to raise awareness about disability and celebrate the importance of creating accessible and inclusive communities. And I really love this, this cartoon that's up on the slide here. We see, a number of students who are waiting to go into school in the morning. It was a snowy day, much like today, if you're anywhere close to my area of the province. There's someone shoveling, and one of the students who's in a wheelchair asks, "Could you please shovel the ramp?" And the man shoveling says, "Well, all these other kids are waiting to use the stairs, so once I finish shoveling them off, I'll come do the ramp for you." And this is just one of those examples where it's a very simple sort of like switch in perspective that can make all the difference, right? Because the person in the wheelchair, of course, points out, well, if you shovel off the ramp, then we can all get in. And I think that's one of the main messages I would like you to take away from today, is just that piece, that accessibility, it doesn't only help people with disabilities, it really does help everyone. Shoveling off that ramp, it helps that student. It's also going to help any parent with a stroller. There's really no piece of accessibility that only benefits the person with a disability themselves. Even if I use an example from my own life, the building I'm living in right now and presenting to you from, we have these a double set of doors in between the elevator and the underground parking garage where my car is. And when I moved in, there was no automatic, door button or anything on those doors. And they're pretty heavy, but it was like, fine. I'm pretty lucky with my level of spinal cord injury that I have full function of my upper body. And so, I could certainly get by. It was maybe not the most ideal when I was carrying groceries and stuff, but whatever. I never even put in a request, but then a few months after me moving in, the building took it upon themselves to install automatic doors. And what was interesting to me is as soon as those buttons were installed, I never saw one person touch the door handles ever again. Because, whether you're me in the wheelchair or you're simply, that one trip warrior who's trying to carry all their groceries upstairs in one trip is certainly benefiting from an automatic door. Or again, a parent with a stroller or a baby carrier is benefiting, or someone moving, furniture in and out of the building is benefiting from these doors. So accessibility really does help everyone. And then it was almost like twofold interesting, because the type they happened to install weren't like the push buttons we're probably most accustomed to seeing, but it was like that same sort of where you would see the button. Instead, it was just like this motion sensor that you just have to wave in front of. And so then with COVID, when the pandemic hit, it was extra interesting because it dawned on me that, oh, wow, this is also beneficial, because not only is it just easier, but no one has to touch a common surface, right? And we're all just getting through the doors without touching anything at all. So, okay, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent there, but just a piece to say that accessibility really does help everyone. And that's why we hope to get, you interested in taking action, but also certainly, inspiring your future students to do so. And so the other pillars of our program are to empower students to take action on these issues once they learn about them, and really get them excited about the differences they can make in their communities. This is all really built upon Rick's legacy. Certainly he accomplished many great things, and the program is based on his belief in the power of youth and their ability to change the world as well. And so we hope that you get involved. We send out a year-end survey for all of our teachers that do participate in our program, and year after year they agree that participation results in decreased bullying, increased volunteerism, students believing that they can be difference makers, a willingness to help others, as well as a stronger culture of inclusion in classrooms and schools. So there is certainly a benefit on covering these topics in the classroom. We've also made sure, we've made it a priority of the program to make sure that our resources align with the education priorities as well as provincial curriculum outcomes. And so our goal here is really, we know how busy teachers are and how many worthy causes there are for you to be covering with your students in the classroom. And so we really want to take the work out of it for you and make our materials as easily implementable as possible. And so this is one of the ways we do that, in just allowing you to, one, cover these topics, confidently, because we understand that you can't be an expert on every single issue that there is out there. So we've kind of covered the topics for you, but in using our materials, not only do you get to, know that you're making a difference through teaching these subjects, but you're also hitting your curriculum outcomes at the same time. We're not adding extra work for you. And these documents here, I won't go into all this detail, but these are available on our website, rickhansen.com/schools, if you ever were curious to kind of read in more detail how we connect with the curriculum. And this is another resource that might be of interest, maybe even for you to just kind of mentally take note of, that it exists out there if and when you ever did have a student in the future who has a physical disability. This is a really nice resource that we put together with some other disability organizations. And it's kind of just like some tips and really practical ways that you can improve accessibility for your students in the classroom. So just know that that's also available for, instant download from our website if you wanted to read further. And then, coming back to the why, sometimes, when we look at that previous resource, like how to make your classroom accessible for a student with a disability, sometimes teachers have, or I've found at least, sometimes they, that's when they'll be motivated or really, feel the need to improve accessibility and inclusion in the classroom, is when they have a student, whether it's in their own class or in their school, who has a disability. But I hope you take home with you today kind of, realizing that disability is actually really common, and it's, 1 in 5 Canadians have a disability. And so whether or not there happens to be a student with a disability in your future classrooms or schools, your students are still gonna, either have people in their own lives, whether it's a family member or, a family friend, or just simply interacting and encountering people with disabilities in their day-to-day lives outside of school. They will have those interactions. And so, we really believe that in school from a young age, kind of developing, allowing students to really develop this, equitable outlook on life and being inclusive of all kinds of people. We want that to be an important topic of conversation, whether it's kind of in the immediate environment or not. I'm just going to read this comment here. I noticed that the elementary school I was at for practicum did not have an elevator. I asked how the school would accommodate a student who needed one and was told they may just move the class to the lower level, which could get tricky. Yeah, I even heard, like, I presented to Grand Erie District School Board this year, and they were actually telling me a student in their school community, like in their board, last year had sustained some kind of disability, and their school wasn't accessible, and so they actually just had to move schools, which, I think is just so tough, because they have to make all new friends with a new disability. Like, it's just, those are the types of things that, of course, I know individuals, teachers cannot just create an elevator out of nowhere in their schools, But if we as a collective see this as a greater priority, certainly, those pieces, whether it's provincial government, will fall into place into really making this a priority for our communities. Okay, so I'll get into what we really do have to offer you now. I did want to note that our resources, whether you are teaching in the classroom or are teaching virtually, that we do have materials that can help you in either format. I could not have said the same thing this time last year, but thanks to COVID, we certainly made some adaptations to how we support teachers. And so you can, whatever kind of format you're looking for, or even engagement level, we have something to meet your needs. And so one of the things we have to offer are books. If you teach maybe those younger grades, kind of like the kindergarten to maybe grade 2, 3 level, we all know how important representation is. And so we have these books that sort of cover different aspects of Rick's life and have that, protagonist as a person with a disability. The book on the far right, The Boy Who Loved to Move, is our newer of the 3. And all of those books can be, are available in hard copy that you can order for free. They're also available as audiobooks and ebooks downloadable from our website. But The Boy Who Loved to Move, we also have this YouTube version, which is really cool. It's like, an audio visual video of the book, but it has closed captioning throughout, and then it also has ASL interpretation throughout. So it's a really cool way to show the book to students, and even without pointing it out to begin with, but just showing them the video, and then maybe having that discussion afterwards of why some of those accessibility pieces, like the captioning, like the ASL interpretation, are so important for different types of readers. And our latest newsletter that went out, I don't suspect many of you are subscribed to our newsletter, but you can always subscribe if you're interested in the future. We just announced last week that we just put out this unit plan to go along with The Boy Who Loved to Move. So that's really cool too. Now students can, watch or read the book, and then we have all kinds of lessons to go along with the story. We also, for those who might not have a ton of time to devote to these topics, but are looking for kind of quick activities, in the spring, Little Big Lessons is what we put out to sort of offer something during the pandemic. Our original materials and toolkits were like the hard copy version. I'll show you about here. Like they were like the physical books that you could order from us, and we had the digital download versions, but they're like full toolkits that are really geared toward the educator, right? They went through all of the assessment tools, the curriculum connections, the full lesson plan. And so when schools shut down and kids were just kind of at home with their parents, we were like, we wanted to be able to do something to support parents who are at home with their kids. But we didn't really have anything that was simply geared toward, kind of had that more self-directed style of lesson. So that's when we created the Little Big Lessons, and they are adapted straight from our original full lesson plans, but they just kind of cut to the chase of what the actual activity is. And what we found, I guess unsurprisingly now, but originally these were simply geared toward parents, to help keep the kids busy, but still providing something educational. But what we found is when teachers returned to teaching, whether virtually or back in the classroom, that they really loved this format too, because it was just a much quicker and easier way to implement these lessons into the classroom. So I encourage you to check them out if you're interested. These can be accessed from our website without even signing up. They're ungated on our website, so nice and easy to download. And then something else we have, if again, just looking for kind of quick ways to bring these topics into the classroom, are scenario cards, which just kind of walk through various disability or accessibility scenarios where you can kind of get, some conversation going with students about what they would do in certain situations. So those are great as well. And then looking into the more full lesson plans, this here is an example of a grade 5 lesson called On the Move. And here again, just kind of illustrating my point of, our lessons cover topics that teachers already need to be teaching. So this one here is about friction and mass and how that affects momentum and speed. We just happen to be looking at those topics through the disability lens and would be bringing in examples of ramp slope and wheelchairs, etc. Here's another example of a grade 7 lesson, this one called First Impressions and Stereotypes. And if you look at these trivia questions, they may look a little familiar to what we did at the start of my presentation. So congrats to all of you for absolutely nailing this grade 7 lesson. And then for those who might be teaching at the secondary level, we know, of course, that you might be teaching just very specific subjects as opposed to being with your students all day. So if you wanted to search what we have to offer by subject, that's available as well. At the secondary level, we also have some toolkits that are really useful, and that can maybe be kind of used in various classes that just teach these really broad but important concepts. We have the power of teamwork, leadership, identifying personal passions, and presentation skills. So these are pulled from either our Difference Maker toolkit or the Personal Leadership toolkit. And then finally, many of our Little Big lessons are now up on this website called GHM Academy. They're a Canadian organization based out of Montreal. And this is where we're now offering some sort of interactive e-learning style lessons. So many of our Little Big lessons on our site will redirect you right to the online version. But if you do prefer that worksheet style format, those are still, you'll see the link to download the PDF if that's the format you prefer. And here's just another example, this one for high school students, again, on international disability rights. I mentioned briefly the Difference Maker toolkit on the secondary side. So we actually have that toolkit available for both elementary and secondary students. And it's a series of 4 lessons, which can be adapted. You can either cover it in a week, or you can, do it bit by bit over a semester, even a full school year if you wanted for the elementary side. And we have these certificates and wristbands available for teachers to order for their classrooms as just a nice way of recognizing those students' completion of the program. And of course, we're just really trying to inspire students to want to make a difference. So this is one way of doing so. And then every year we also take it kind of one step further, and we have what we call the Difference Maker of the Year awards. And we award these to both students and educators. So even if you wanted to nominate someone, maybe you worked with a really incredible teacher who's making a difference, teaching in this pandemic world this fall, I'm not sure, but these are awards that, we like to recognize any student or teachers who are making a difference in that, whether it's accessibility related or inclusion related in their school community or even their broader community. If you do receive our newsletter, it'll certainly be announced there when the nomination portal opens up for 2021. It's not up quite yet, but this is one example of an educator who won last year's Educator Award. And he was someone who did have a student with a disability in his class. The student's name was Todd, who had a complex disability and used a wheelchair. And Chris's class every year, he's based out of BC. I believe it was he taught grade 7. It could be grade 6 or grade 7. But every year he would take his class on this like snowshoeing expedition day, and they would do all kinds of survival skills activities out on their kind of like winter fun celebration day. And with the new school year with Todd and his class, he kind of like set his class out on this mission. I think he called it Project Leave No One Behind or something like that. And he basically tasked his students with, finding a way of making that winter expedition day accessible and inclusive for Todd, their classmate. And they all worked together and they ended up, collecting donations of like lumber from their local home hardware and stuff like that, and using their, like their math skills to make all the measurements of to build this adaptable sled for Todd, so that he could participate going snowshoeing with them. And it was, like they had a blast. They put together a video all about it. And that's certainly the type of work that we love to acknowledge here at the foundation. But again, it doesn't have to be because a teacher has a student with a disability in the class. There's still so many ways that teachers can be making a difference, right? And I like this quote here too, because of course we know, like, I hope all of us here hope to see students, developing that compassion and empathy as they're going through school. And then last piece of our program that I wanted to make sure to talk to you about today is our ambassador program. And this is, I think, my favorite. We have a group of ambassadors who are speakers from all across the country, who are all people with some form of physical disability. So they have that lived experience, and they offer presentations to whether it's a classroom or a whole school. And they present a little about Rick's story. They speak about their own personal story and their lived experience with disability. And they cover, the important topics of accessibility, of inclusion, and they really kind of like spark that excitement among students to really take action. And these are available for schools at no cost. Our generous sponsors kind of cover the honorarium. So our ambassadors still do get get paid to do this important work, but it's all free for teachers to book. So, even that, just to be aware of, if you are back in the classroom, to know that this is something that is available to you. This is one part of our program that, again, we can see that the photo here. Certainly this was pre-COVID, when everyone could get together in a gymnasium and meet face to face. And there's, certainly great benefits to that kind of energy, being together in a room. And so when we had to kind of change to the virtual environment last spring, we really weren't sure how that would go. I know personally, I was kind of like, oh, I don't know, like, can you hold, a bunch of 6-year-olds' attentions through a screen? And then plus, like, I obviously disclosed that I have a disability, but if you were just, hadn't read my bio and were meeting me from kind of the shoulders up, like, you would never know that I'm sitting in a wheelchair as opposed to just any other chair, right? So we just weren't sure if it would have that same kind of impact. And what we found is that they were, to some degree, even more engaging, because I think in some cases it can be scary or a little intimidating for students to ask those questions in the in-person environment. We know when it comes to disability, sometimes people are afraid of saying the wrong thing and that sort of thing. And we've been getting such incredible questions and feedback and participation from students of all grade levels. You can see some of the examples here on the screen. I know the one in the top left, like, I could not get over this question from a grade 6 student. What was your first emotion when you realized you were paralyzed? And our ambassador handled the question like a champ, but it was like, I don't think I've been asked personally a question that kind of deep from such a young kid. And then, of course, even just the kindergarten teacher noting that her students noticed after hearing from the ambassador that, they were kind of looking around their own classroom, realizing, we're not sure if you could really be in here in a wheelchair. It's not very accessible. And so it's been really great to see. And, one of the silver linings actually to this virtual environment is, prior to COVID, we were kind of, because we just weren't operating virtually. It wasn't something we offered. So we were kind of, bound to be doing presentations where we geographically had an ambassador available. Whereas now we've been able to offer these presentations to all kinds of rural and remote communities. So that's been very cool to see. I skip over it here, but we do have some kind of example videos. I'm not going to play this, but on YouTube, if you look up the Rick Hansen Foundation, you can find sort of these sample videos that give you an idea of what a presentation can be like if you were curious. And what's nice here, and the feedback I've received from teachers and principals alike, is that, for those teachers who might really feel uncomfortable teaching about these topics because they don't feel like they're an expert and they don't feel as though it's like their topic to cover, this allows to really have that person with the lived experience invited into the classroom to speak on it themselves. And we've heard time and time again that it really allowed the teacher to then feel confident afterwards to kind of keep those conversations going and then incorporate some of the lessons. And we certainly find, even when teachers maybe do a few of those scenario cards before hosting the ambassador presentation, they're always so much more engaged, the students, at that point, because they've had some time to think about these things, right? And so that's what we're really trying to promote is, not having kind of like a one-off day talking about accessibility, but really keeping the conversation going throughout the school year and realizing how broadly applicable these topics are. And then I just wanted to mention, if you were interested in looking at our materials, you can create an account on our website. I think, Stefania, I saw you put the link into the chat, so that's fantastic. It's free to sign up. It only takes a minute, and then you have full access to everything. Although things like our Little Big Lessons, you can already access without being signed up if you're interested. I also wanted to make sure to mention that, we always welcome teacher candidate volunteers. If you are interested in any of these topics, if you're interested in, kind of the equity or inclusion topics, if you're interested in resource development or even that e-learning side of things, being a nonprofit, we are a pretty small but mighty team. And so we always welcome volunteers if that's something you're interested in, and want to be able to have some of that stuff on your resume. There's certainly so many things that we can, so many volunteer positions we can put together to make a really mutually, beneficial relationship. This is something we have kind of informal agreement with UBC since our head office is in BC, but doesn't mean we couldn't get something going at Western as well. So if you are interested, please don't hesitate to email me and I can put you in touch with the right people. Or if you have a classmate who didn't tune into the session today, but who might be interested in these topics of equity or inclusion, feel free to let them know, of course, about our program, what's available to them, maybe when you're doing practicums. I'm sure teachers would love if you were introducing them to these kinds of free programs that are available to them, or certainly passing along to classmates if they'd like to volunteer as well. So that is, I don't think I went over my 40 minutes. No, we're good. Okay, so that's what I had to share today, and I'm really happy to take any questions. If anyone has questions or topics of discussion.
So if you have a question, you can just write it in the chat. And Marie, I'm not sure if you can you still see the chat?
I can, yeah. And I'm seeing a question here from Emily saying, I heard that all schools need to be accessible by 2025. Is that accurate or still the case? To be completely honest, I'm not sure. There have been many kind of different year marks out there for whether it's businesses or schools, et cetera, needing to be accessible. Unfortunately, a lot of these kind of laws that come into place end up applying for new builds. And so sometimes older buildings get to just sort of be grandfathered in, but as we know, many of our schools are older buildings. And so I would have to look into that to know for sure. Anyone else has? Is it appropriate to ask a student with a disability at the beginning of the year, how can I best support you in the classroom? No, I think that's a fabulous, that is appropriate. And that's the thing, right? When it comes to people with disabilities, the kind of slogan we like to say at the foundation is just ask. We get into trouble when we make those kinds of assumptions, right? Like, even if I think of myself again, we had that question, you all answered certainly correctly in terms of asking if you should always help someone with a disability as much as possible. And the answer is no, you don't need to help as much as possible. Like, just ask if they do need the help. If you're a teacher and you have a student with a disability, that would be the best thing to do right at the start of the year. Depending on the age of the student as well, you can of course have that conversation with the parent, but it's so important to be empowering students with disabilities from that young age to really, for them to be able to express themselves, what kind of support they might need. Because they might need, things that you wouldn't have thought of, or they might need a lot less than you would assume. And, certainly, sometimes it gets tricky too. Like, certainly you would want to be having that conversation one-on-one with them. We never want to get into the situation of like singling out the student with a disability. And that's why sometimes too, I find it so important that we make these conversations and covering these topics in school kind of the norm across the board, so that classrooms, regardless of whether there's a student with a disability, is going to be talked about, and that's just normalized, so that it doesn't have to be this kind of othering topic when, it's like, oh, we're covering this because Sally's in the class who uses a wheelchair, so we have to, we want it to just be the norm. But no, asking that student is definitely the appropriate thing to do.
As I just reread that one question, I realized that question as a teacher on the first day could be a question given to all students, like what environmental accommodations would you like to see in the classroom throughout the year? And it could be in terms of lighting, space. So as I reread my question, I realized that that's not only an important question for a student with a disability, and you just mentioned like not creating that like other because someone's in the classroom. So there's ways that we just need to think about achieving the information we need, but making it inclusive for everyone in the classroom.
That is such a fabulous point. Yeah, absolutely. Because again, as well, of course, we know, that there are all kinds of invisible disabilities, and yeah, maybe a student might have a really, might really benefit from dimmer lighting or whatever it may be, and you would never know if you're simply concerned with that student who uses a cochlear implant or whatever the case may be. Yeah, that's fabulous, treating, everyone equally. Awesome. Thank you so much for adding that. Okay, what should we as educators do with field trips? Some trips may not be accessible for all students, but the class is pushing forward going somewhere, or it is something that has been done for years. What would be the best way to get around this? So, I mean, my personal opinion would be to choose a trip that is accessible, assuming you're asking in the case where there is a student with a disability or a student who might not be able to participate in the same way as everyone else. But, yeah, I mean, when the class is pushing towards going, or it's something that has been done for years. I mean, there's lots of examples of things that have been done for years, but it doesn't mean we need to keep doing them. And even if it's something like, like some kind of sport or whatever, I mean, even regardless again of whether there's a student with a disability or not, like I know, for example, when I was in high school, we used to have this like student versus teacher hockey game every year. And there are things, depending as well, like on which communities you're teaching in, and kind of the state of the world when it comes to COVID, but there's so many great, disability sport organizations that have all kinds of free rental programs or free programming for schools, even like rent out a full class set of basketball wheelchairs, so classes can like learn how to play the sport, right? So I'm just thinking like in that hockey example, whether or not there's a student with a disability, this year it's going to be sledge hockey just to learn how to do it. It's something fun. It levels the playing field regardless of people's skating ability, et cetera, et cetera. So I would sort of encourage us to find innovative ways of doing things that can be really inclusive, right? And again, prioritizing, if it's visiting, like, I mean, most museums are accessible, but if it's visiting somewhere, we want to be sort of rewarding places with our business that are choosing to be accessible, right? And so I would encourage finding those kind of options as opposed to doing something just because it's been tradition or something like The AODA's goal is to make customer service, employment, information and communications, transportation design, and public spaces barrier-free by 2025, which includes schools. Amazing. We will, 4 years, that's a lofty goal for 4 years. I guess we will see if it comes true. But the thing is it's so much more likely to be achieved if we have, kind of a greater sense in the population overall of that being a priority, right? And I mean, I would encourage you, even, I know we're all kind of staying home more these days and maybe not going out to do as many things, but I would encourage you, even if you just spend one of your typical days kind of keeping an eye out for certain things in your environment that might not be accessible. And I think too, sometimes when we think about accessibility, we really do think of wheelchair specifically, like wheelchair accessibility specifically. There's so many elements to accessibility, which is another really cool reason to, or reason for our ambassador presentations is because we have, people with all kinds of different lived experience with disabilities. Classes can even, have 3 different presentations in a year and hear about a completely different experience of disability, of accessibility issues, because not having a ramp is one thing, but also not having Braille signage to be able to wayfind through a building is another that might not be quite as obvious to see. There's so many levels to it. From a teacher perspective, what would be the best way to go about students who lack understanding and make fun of students with a disability? This is something I unfortunately noticed in my high school. Yeah, that's too bad. I mean, I really do believe, that if these types of topics are covered from these young ages, like if these topics are introduced and we're making a point of creating really inclusive environments right from when a kid is in kindergarten and they're touching on this all throughout their schooling, I would have to, this is my assumption, but I would have to assume that those types of behaviors would be less common when, when students are reaching that high school age level. But yeah, I mean, I would, how many are we on? I think there's many of us, 150 of us on the call. I don't know, does anyone else have some ideas, or maybe if you were in a classroom as a teacher in a school and you witnessed this, how you would address it? I'd love to hear other opinions. If anyone has any, feel free to put them into the chat or maybe unmute yourself.
While we're waiting, in case maybe someone's typing an answer, I have a question just about what are some things that, like, as a teacher entering my classroom at the beginning of the year, like how can I make my classroom more accessible just for everybody?
So I mean, some of the problems that we see in terms of physical accessibility in the classroom it's interesting because again, COVID could have helped with this, but desks being really close together is one problem, right, for any type of mobility aid. So having spaces more spaced out is one thing. Items being really high on shelves, or like coat hooks being high on shelves, again, is something that would be really hard for someone who's seated to access. But again, also just, students when they're young are also, I'm kind of, when I'm sitting in my wheelchair, I'm kind of like, student height, younger student height. And so these are all things that can be really helpful for everyone. Another accessibility piece that has been interesting with COVID is that a lot of people with hearing impairments rely on mouth reading, right? Lip reading, sorry. And so masks have made it really challenging for them to effectively communicate, because they really do benefit from seeing our facial expressions and lips specifically. And so, those are definitely accommodations you would want to be making if you knew that there was someone in the classroom. But again, I would say, pointing out some of these things, even if it's, again, like a high color contrast also on like posters or in presentations is important too, for visual disabilities, which can benefit, a whole great range of visual impairment, right? Like it doesn't have to be a very severe visual disability for someone to still benefit from high contrast. So even just kind of pointing some of these things out when we're setting up our classroom a certain way, or when we're choosing to print handouts in certain colors or whatever it is, I think just weaving in those teachable moments is a really great way of just, implementing a more inclusive, accessible environment for all students, and just kind of pointing out why it could be beneficial. I noticed, sorry, one of these comments, that you can't see the question. So I'll repeat the previous question in case anyone had more comments to add on it. It is, what would be the best way to go about students who lack understanding and make fun of students with a disability? So I guess if you were a teacher in a school and you saw students making fun of a person with a disability, what ideas do you have on how you would address that in them? And the person who wrote the comment said that this is something that they unfortunately did witness when they were in high school. There's another comment here. I worked with a student with cerebral palsy who had some mobility challenges, and the clutter of winter gear really was a struggle for them. And having a conversation about organization without focusing on them really helped. Yeah, totally. And I mean, the winter clutter, that's something even, like there's certain personality types even that will just be bothered by seeing that kind of like busyness in the classroom, right? So again, things that really help, I'm sure even just as the teacher looking at a more organized classroom is beneficial, but certainly helps anyone with those mobility challenges. And I don't think I had a slide on it, but we have some really great lessons for a few different age ranges that actually are, some of our most popular, and called the School Inspectors lesson. And it kind of provides a checklist that students can go through from either the standpoint of someone with a mobility impairment, a vision impairment, or a hearing impairment. And it just provides a checklist for them to kind of go around navigating their school to kind of see how well it really does on this kind of like accessibility report card. And then we made a home inspectors version last spring, so students can still do the activity in their own home to check that out. There's we also have like a kindergarten or grade 1 version that has kind of few pictures of classroom with some differences where they can spot the differences, one being kind of not so accessible and one with a lot of these changes. And it's these same things that we've been talking about, right? There's in the first drawing, there's all kinds of bean bags and games and things on the floor. And then of course, in the second image, those are cleared out. And so, yeah, those activities can be really fun, of course, whether or not you're kind of like speaking about disability specifically. Yeah, so any ideas on how we might be able to address students who are making fun of someone with a disability? I'm just curious if any of you have ideas, since you are the ones who are going to be in those classroom environments. And I'm not sure that I gave the very best answers, so I would love to hear. There's a comment here, having an in-class activity that involves the student with disability. Another strategy would be to directly address the student who is harassing the student with disabilities. Yeah, I would certainly agree that the student, bullying or harassing would need to be addressed. Yeah. And I think too, some of those activities, like I mentioned, like the sport organizations who have like basketball wheelchairs available and things like that, sometimes the reason the bullying might come about or whatever is because we're unfortunately not viewing that person with a disability as able as, the normal, whatever normal is, whatever it comes to, whatever the activity is. And So I really like, the idea of kind of leveling the playing field when it comes to some of those things, because it's a really nice way of showing that, people with disabilities are just as able as anyone else. We just certainly have, different ways of doing things. I played competitive wheelchair tennis, and it's, one of my absolute favorite things, getting my able-bodied friends to play tennis with me in wheelchairs. There's always a pretty steep learning curve, so it's fun. Preventative is best. Yeah, I agree. That's definitely what I was trying to get at with, just starting these conversations from a young age. Emily says, but in this case, I would say the same protocol as dealing with bullying, address it and condemn it immediately, zero tolerance policy. Utilizing the resources from the website would be great to increase the awareness, sensitivity, and mindfulness of the entire class. Planning an ambassador to do a presentation would be awesome for the whole school. Information is great and so important. Positive reinforcement of positive behavior. Love that. What are the most common disabilities seen in the classroom? I'm not sure that I actually have the stats on this, but I would say likely hearing impairments are relatively common. Oftentimes when it comes to visual impairments, they do actually have like specific schools where students can learn to read Braille and use that specific technology. So I think sometimes it's a little less common to have students who are blind in the traditional classroom. And then when it comes to, maybe some more mobility related disabilities, spina bifida can be quite common, cerebral palsy can be quite common. And the other thing to know about disabilities is they always range in experience, right? Like even from my own spinal cord injury, I have friends who I've met through wheelchair tennis who also have spinal cord injuries, but our bodies are affected in completely different ways based on what vertebrae we broke. And so, really, regardless of what disability a student might have, and whether or not you maybe, feel familiar with that disability, to really still get to know what that specific student needs, because it might very well be different from, say, a previous student or a previous person that you know in your life. Another comment here about the bullying piece, depending on what the severity of what was said, that is often a good time to involve the principal or the admin team in general. Having a principal talk to the student can help the student understand the weight of what was said. Absolutely. And I think that ignorance oftentimes occurs when learning opportunities have been limited. At my school, we often work directly in the differentiated learning classroom, and we're often invited to stay for lunch. This allowed us to develop personal relationships with these students who may experience bullying and discrimination. That's really fantastic that your school did that. Yeah. Great, thank you so much for adding your comments there. I think that made for a much richer answer. And again, I would just like to thank you all for joining this session today. I'm not sure if you have to quickly head off to your next one, but so many thanks. I can throw my email up there once more. If you ever want to get involved with us, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, or you can also get in contact. There's all kinds of contact info on our website. So thank you so much, and good luck with the rest of your school year this year.
All right, thank you, Anne-Marie. And I just wanted to let everyone know, please make sure you complete your check for understanding form at the end, so we can mark that you've attended this session. Okay, thank you so much, Marie. That was an awesome presentation. I definitely learned a lot, even just in terms of little things you can do in your classroom to make it more accessible for everybody. And then for me, the most real thing is the example of, hold on, I'm going to stop recording.